I hope that Africa can take a note, and I hope that South Africa can take a note from the brave leadership that we've seen in the Sahel region of Africa. People like Captain Ibrahim Traore, Mr. Chiani in Niger, people who are fighting for truth.
Activist Jackson Hinkle advises Africa to build nuclear machines in order to earn the respect of the world. Activist and political commentator Jackson Hinkle recently made a bold suggestion. Africa should develop nuclear weapons to earn respect on the global stage.
Well, the ambassador started off his comments by quoting Nelson Mandela, the famous quote, asked me by how many times I stood up after I fell. I'd like to quote one of my American comrades, the former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who said, "I ask you to judge me by the enemies that I have made." When you look at Russia and you look at Africa, it's no part of their own doing, but the enemies that have been made in both Africa and Russia are enemies of humanity. It's the West, the collective West, and it's not the Western civilization, people like me, it's people who sit in the White House and who sit in the deep state, as we call it. Now, there may have been a change of guard in Washington, D.C. just past week, but there's not a change of heart, there's not a change of soul. If you look at the Secretary of State that was just selected, Marco Rubio, he is a neoconservative that wants to continue the subjugation of Africa, continue the subjugation and slavery of Latin America, and wants to continue the policies that have brought about so much of the misery, the sorrow, and the chaos that we have seen in Africa and Latin America and the whole global South for decades upon decades, far before I was ever born. I hope that Africa can take a note, and I hope that South Africa can take a note from the brave leadership that we've seen in the Sahel region of Africa. People like Captain Ibrahim Traore, Mr. Chiani in Niger, people who are fighting for true sovereignty and who understand that humanity and war are equals, that war is just about being human, and that if you're not willing to threaten everything for the collective existence of your civilization, then you have no dignity, you have no honor at all. Russia understood that, and that's why they went in to go liberate the people of the Donbass, those who were suffering under the persecution of the Nazis in Kiev for years and years and years, back since even before 2014, when there was the Orange Revolution in Kiev in 2004, backed by the United States. So I see a lot of great minds coming out of South Africa. I see a lot of great movements coming out of South Africa, but until you're willing to actually stand up to the beast in the United States, like me and many of my comrades are trying to do right now, there will be no true sovereignty for South Africa. You'll have the same old, you'll have the continued economic order. Of course, South Africa was able to do away with the discrimination that plagued this country during apartheid. But did the economic order really change? I don't think so. And until South Africa is willing to truly stand up to the West and, absolve itself of its past political mistakes, there will be no true sovereignty. So from America, I say many of us love you. We appreciate the struggle that you're all fighting for. We see it as a continued struggle that we fought for in 1776. If I were to draw on the history of China and the history of Iran and Korea and Russia, there's one bottom line determining factor with all of them, and that's that before their revolutions, before they commanded respect, the situation in each one of those countries was not great, whether it was being indebted to Western banksters, whether it was a series of illegal coups or regime change operations or assassinations. These countries did not command respect on the global stage to the Western imperialists. That's the same problem that Africa is facing today. There is no respect that is commanded to the imperialists except for in the Nuke Confederation in Mali, and Niger, and Burkina Faso. And we've seen Russia come in and help secure the region against the US-backed threats from Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups. But ultimately, I think that Africa needs to learn from China, from Korea, from Iran, and from Russia, who first had these beautiful revolutions that commanded the respect, Then they developed their militaries, they developed nuclear bombs, they developed all these sorts of things, and then they built their economies. We're sitting here and we're talking about being in the United Nations, having a rotating seat in the United Nations Security Council. We're talking about the economic plans of Africa in the future, new currencies, African Union. All of that doesn't mean a whole lot if the West is going to come in and trample all over you. What good is a seat at the United Nations if they're not going to listen to you? The United States has to listen to China. They have to listen to Russia because China and Russia have a bunch of nuclear bombs that are already pointed at every Western city. Now, of course, I support Africa having nuclear bombs. I understand we're far away from that, and maybe it's a bit controversial to say that. But what I think we also need to understand is that Africans are dealing with the same issues that the American citizens are dealing with under our own regime. Americans are dealing with fraudulent elections. We're dealing with censorship. We're dealing with the monopoly of land and private capital. And until Americans and Africans are able to command respect, then there really is no future for either of our peoples. Ultimately, to sum up, I want to bring in the point of Ukraine as well, because Ukraine did something very interesting recently. Zelensky realizes that the front line in Ukraine is collapsing. The Russians are moving in. So what did he do? He threatened the ability for Ukraine to be able to develop nuclear bombs. He said, Ukraine can develop a nuclear bomb in several weeks. And then everyone got very worried about that. I think the West needs to get very worried about the potential for Africa to assert its own sovereignty and command respect in the same way that we're seeing in the new Confederation states, but all across Africa. And maybe it only starts with one or two nations, but that's exactly what we saw with Iran and Syria. And now look at the United States proxy of Israel. Israel's collapsing because they understand that the strength of Iran and the strength of Syria with the backing of Russia is, it's completely incomparable to the strength of Israel, who would undoubtedly lose in a conventional war against these nations and their proxies all across the region. So I think the question of military power is extremely important, and it actually comes before the question of economic power or trade routes or currencies or any of these things. So I hope to see more bold leadership, even in the case of Niger. Victoria Nuland was too afraid to tell Nigeria to invade Niger because she understood the military power of these Sahel states with the backing of Russia. They wanted to do an ECOWAS invasion, and with the intervention of Russia and China and the military backing in the Sahel states, they understood in the United States that this was a no-go, that they couldn't do it. So I hope in my lifetime, I'll end here, that we'll see a nuclear Africa. We're already seeing Russia. Rosatom is talking about bringing nuclear reactors into Burkina Faso, but I hope one day it's nuclear bombs.
Now, whether you agree or not, this statement opens up some serious questions about power dynamics, international law, and Africa's position in the world. So, let's unpack it together. First things first. What exactly did Jackson Hinkle say? Hinkle is known for his provocative takes, and in this instance, he argued that African nations should consider developing nuclear weapons to demand respect and autonomy from Western powers. His reasoning? Historically, countries with nuclear capabilities tend to be treated with a lot more caution, and often a lot more respect. Think of nations like North Korea, India, or Pakistan. They might not always play by the rules, but they're definitely not ignored. But here's the catch. Building nukes isn't just about flipping a switch. There's something called the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, signed in 1968. This treaty essentially says, hey, no new countries should build nukes. Right now, only 9 countries officially have them. And while a few nations have broken the rules, anyone trying to go nuclear risks economic sanctions, political isolation, and even military. Now let's talk about why this advice is controversial. Africa is home to 54 nations, each with its own unique challenges and opportunities. Many of these countries are already fighting battles on multiple fronts: poverty, corruption, and foreign interference, to name a few. Adding nuclear ambitions to the mix? That's a high-stakes gamble. On one hand, nuclear power could act as a shield against external exploitation, but on the other hand, it could also turn Africa into a battleground for proxy wars between major powers. History shows us that building nukes often comes at a heavy cost. India and Pakistan, for example, faced decades of economic sanctions before they were grudgingly accepted as nuclear states. Even North Korea, despite having nukes, struggles with crippling sanctions and isolation. Now, let's zoom out. If Africa were to pursue nuclear weapons, who would lead the charge? South Africa used to have nukes. They built 6 during apartheid, but dismantled them in the 1990s. Would they reconsider? Or would another country like Nigeria or Egypt take the lead? And then there's the question of unity. Can a continent with so many diverse nations and interests come together to achieve something this ambitious? Let's break it down. On the pro side, 1. Geopolitical leverage. Nukes could shift the balance of power in Africa's favor. 2. Deterrence. Potentially stop foreign meddling or military interventions. But here's the con side. 1. Economic sanctions. Many African economies rely on international trade and aid. 2. Ethical and environmental risks. Developing nukes isn't just expensive, it's dangerous. So does Jackson Hinkle have a point? Maybe. There's no denying that nuclear weapons can elevate a nation's standing, but they also come with enormous risks, political, economic, and moral. Ultimately, the question isn't just, should Africa build nukes? It's, what kind of respect does Africa want to command, and at what cost? Africa's strength lies in its diversity, its resources, and its potential. Building nukes is one path, but it's not the only one. Investing in economic growth, fostering innovation, and creating strong alliances can also make the world. But that's just my take. What do you think? Is Hinkle's advice bold or reckless? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep questioning the world around you.